I think the typical one for lots of new missionaries that come to the Netherlands is Goedendag, ik ben Ruben. Ik ben hier om met mensen te praten. En dat ik met veel mensen kan spreken. En dus ik hoop om met u te praten, zodat ik met u beter kan leren kennen. So it's as opposed to ik ben Ruben, ik ben hier om met vele mensen te praten en ik hoop u beter te leren kennen en ik hoop dat wij goede vrienden mogen worden en dat wij goede ervaringen met elkaar mogen hebben. So I think the difference is when you're learning Dutch at the very beginning, you don't really have a lot of, especially like when you're learning it here in the United States, it's really hard to understand how natives actually speak because you're not around them all the time. And so the way Dutch is written, like I said, verbs end in en, so like mogen, hebben. But when you're actually in the Netherlands and they cut off or like kind of like swallow those. So like mogen hebben instead of mogen hebben. So that's just kind of like a local thing, and not necessarily local, but just kind of like a fluent speaker kind of thing. As someone who's studied lots of language, I think it's really beneficial to not only, speak a lot, but also to listen to how people say things. Because you can have perfect grammatical Dutch and it sounds really like, ooh. Or you can have, relatively good grammatical Dutch, and if you have a decent accent with it, people will kind of just be like, oh, okay, interesting. This person, speaks good Dutch. I can tell they're American, but they speak good Dutch. How does this happen? I got that a lot in Belgium. Lots of missionaries who go to Belgium, Belgians kind of say like, whoa, like they speak really interesting, or they speak like pretty good, like Netherlands Dutch. Like, and a lot of the time they'd ask like, hey, where are you from? And we'd say, guess. And they'd say, well, you're like, your G's sound like you're from the Netherlands. Are you from the Netherlands? And I was like, oh, thank you so much. I'm touched that you think that. But no, I'd say we're from America, and then they'd be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So in terms of like the differences between like starting out in Dutch and like becoming more fluent in it, it just comes with listening to lots of the natives and being able to, I would say, even imitate like kind of what they do. So a hard phrase that I learned, not necessarily in the Netherlands, but actually while I was learning it, is 88 krachtige grachten. And that means like 88 powerful canals. But it's just like a very like, it's a guttural tongue twister. That's like 88 krachtige grachten. And that one's kind of a fun one to do. The North in the Netherlands tend to have like more guttural G's. And so like their dialect is like, in where I served in Groningen, they said like, it's Groningen and goeiedag instead of goedendag. And it's like, so there's more guttural up there. The province right next to it is Friesland, and that's actually like a completely different language. They call it Fries. It's actually like what they think a lot of English came from. And that one's kind of interesting in terms of how it affects the language. It's similar, I think, more northern, but Fries definitely has more of an impact on the language up there. Whereas you go to Rotterdam, and so you can say like, ik kom van Rotterdam, man. And so when you have endings in verb endings, all verbs end in en. So like a super Rotterdams person, which is like even kijken instead of even kijken or even kijken. And so it's just a very like dialectical difference. So like if you, as someone who like speaks the language, you can totally pick out someone from Rotterdam, whereas as opposed to someone from Groningen or from Tilburg. In the south of the Netherlands, most people, like where I served in Tilburg, they have this accent where they make all of the R's sound really guttural. So like there's a place there called Berlaar, but they call it Berlaar. And so it's like really, it's a different kind of accent down there even. And like I said, you can go 15 minutes and find a new dialect, or the next 15 minutes up and find a new dialect. It's a super like linguistically rich area to be in. A lot of phrases that I say still, I can remember a specific person where I learned how to say it just like them, so that way it would sound more native, if that makes sense. One that I like to say a lot is just like, oh, come up, yo. It's just like, oh, come on, man. And so whenever, something's frustrating, it's, oh, come up, yo. What do you now? And it's just like, oh, come on, what are you doing? And the yo and the now at the end are like just kind of slang things that you turn like, throw in there. Because you can say, oh, kom op, wat doe je? But doing like kom op yo. It's a very like local thing. It's something that you wouldn't, they're the little like nuances of language that you wouldn't get unless you'd been living there or been talking to lots of natives. And so those are just two of my favorite ones to do, like what do you now? Or that's lekker. Like lekker means delicious. And so it's or tasty. And so that's one that I like to use a lot. Just not necessarily, to flex on people or anything like that, but just because I love Dutch and I love the language, so it's fun to keep it up.